This is Maritime Monthly, and I'm Joedian Munroe. This May, we're celebrating the International Day for Women in Maritime under the theme From Policy to Practice, Advancing Gender Equality for Maritime Excellence. I have the privilege of sitting with some incredible women shaping Jamaica's maritime industry. Women who are not only navigating the space, but creating pathways, influencing decisions, and redefining what leadership looks like. For this episode, I had the privilege to sit with Dr. Evette Smith-Johnson, Director of the School of Graduate Studies and Research at CMU and President of the Women in Maritime Association Caribbean Governing Council. She's helping to build the pathways that move women from maritime training into maritime leadership. Hi, Dr. Smith-Johnson.
Hi, Jody. Today I'm well, thank you.
Okay, so this year, as we celebrate International Day for Women in Maritime, we wanted to sit with you because we know that the theme for this year is From Policy to Practice, Advancing Gender Equality for Maritime Excellence. And we know that you've had a hand in doing that. And so we wanted to speak with you.
Okay, no
Right,
problem.
so there's a couple questions.
Okay.
All right, so when did you realize mentorship had to move beyond informal encouragement and become something more intentional, something built into the pathway for young women?
Probably I realized that a truthful answer would say that I realized that as a young woman myself, which is really years ago now, because I had people who scaffolded me into spaces that I would not have seen myself in had they not said, okay, you're capable, just let us help you. So I walked with a legacy of being mentored into my career space and determined that mentorship is something that I need to do. I need to provide for them.
Why was it important to create a bridge for younger women entering the maritime space? And what did you see was missing that needed to be built?
This is what made it important to create a bridge. A number of young women enter the space with the intention to be tools for employment, employability, and we realized early that knowledge alone is not enough. Women could have a degree, all genders. Women could have a degree, but then they would need to find a space that was a good space to practice their craft and to grow. And when I say good space, that's not a good qualifier. They needed to have a place that saw them as equally competent, a space that did not put any limitations on them because of gender or any other reason, and a space that would not prejudice their ability to grow. And having linked with women who are pioneers in the industry and having heard their stories about the kind of activism and the kind of growing up experience they had, it was important for me to help young women to understand that the space is a space of privilege, a space they cannot walk into just with a degree, but a certain soft skill set that would help them to endure hardship and to build. And so education is the route that I saw that could enable young women to find themselves in the industry.
And that's how WiMAC, the student chapter, came to be.
That's how the student chapter came to be. The student chapter was born out of our desire in the parent organization, the governing council of the parent organization, and I like to use the word to scaffold young women into the space. The women who are part of the larger organization understand that networking and providing help is very important for people to thrive in a space that is predominantly male, a space that doesn't necessarily put a position down and say, hey, this must be filled by a woman. A space where a woman has to make her own way, while she also grows into her best emotional and professional self. That needs a little hand holding because it's not just about knowledge. It's about knowledge, emotional intelligence, learned competencies, the ability to pivot in a space, pivot as a professional and pivot as an emotional being amongst other, other demands that it will bring. And the best way to walk across a rough space is to hold the hand of somebody who can who has been across it a little before you or more often than you have done so. Yeah.
Okay.
So hence mentorship.
All right. So this year's theme, it speaks to moving from policy to practice.
Mm-hmm.
And in your view, what does advancing gender equality look like in practice beyond like the policy and like what does a real opportunity look like?
A real opportunity looks like more than policy. Sorry for repeating it because it sounds cliche now. A real opportunity means capacity building. Let me say it now by an example. The International Maritime Organization has been doing a lot of work in enabling the growth and development of women in the sector under their IMO Gender Program. IMO Gender Program is decades old, and it has helped by articulating policy, articulating regulations, and regulations are more like rules, they are not laws. Mm-hmm. So when the IMO says to member states, for example, that they articulate a quota on employment of technical persons. The IMO will say to member states in fact, this is a reg, well, not a reg, but this is a suggestion. Mm-hmm. It says that in the member states, for every 2 men who are employed in a technical capacity, there is a requirement for 1 woman to be employed in the same capacity. And that is a long ways down the wicket, as the cricket players would say, but it is not sufficient. And acknowledging that it is not sufficient is not being ungrateful. It is just calling a fact. And with the reality that there has to be gratitude that we are walking in a very consistent way towards the goal. However, we have to acknowledge that the goal has not yet been met. Because when a member state says to us, in their port, they need 6, let's say, ship surveyors to ensure that all is well and business is optimal. They have hired 4 of the 6 based on that quota, but cannot hire 2 because they cannot find the 2 women who can function as ship surveyors in their space. We realize that the ask is amazing, but the capacity development is needed. And so what that member state should now do is to say, we can only hire 4 men. We're not finding the 2 women, and they have one of 2 options. One is to function hamburged by being short-staffed by 2, or to think long-term and with the maritime education and training institutions like the CMU or UTT Chaguaramas campus, which does the seafarer and other maritime training, say we are going to find 2 young women with the disposition to be ship surveyors and train them. And it may take us 3 to 4 years, but in a 5-year period, in the medium to long term, we will have the surveyors. Okay. And that is more than policy. Mm-hmm. This is now making provision for real development.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that insight. What have you seen happen when young women are given exposure early through mentorship, networks, or leadership opportunities before they can fully see themselves there?
When young women are given that kind of enablement, what happens is that they become more confident professionals and they become more competent professionals. They get to troubleshoot with a guide. So while they're learning, like learning to drive, people will be in the vehicle for the first day and they tell people, I'm driving. The truth is, they are learning to drive. There are some job functions and competency spaces where we don't get to simulate, then do. We do while learning. Driving is one of those things. Playing the piano is one of those things. As your hands are on the keys, you're learning. Working in the maritime industry is one of those spaces. So a young woman who is on port handling a bill of lading or doing things, they are learning some things. If they have a more knowledgeable author with whom they can interface as they go, some errors won't be made because they will have a coach, and some errors will be corrected quicker because they have someone who's seen the thing before. And so it is important that, as with the student chapter ladies out of the Caribbean Maritime University, they have someone from the industry who has handled a part of what they see themselves doing, and they can be given good guidance. And when they put their hands on the system to practice, they are a little bit more accurate because they have this coach.
Okay, great. So next question would be, what has mentoring young women taught you about leadership, and what do women entering the maritime space need beyond technical preparation to thrive?
Well, mentoring young women, young people in general has taught me that I don't know much about leadership. I know a lot about my own experience as a leader, and therefore I have to be able to say to persons who I'm functioning as a mentor for, that this is my experience, yours may be different, but here are some interpersonal skill sets that you will need as a leader. The truth is, the technical competencies will change from context to context. So I may say, oh, I had a situation once where I dealt with this and this is how I dealt with it. But your situation as mentee may be different, but the interpersonal skill sets will not change. Respect for people, patience, knowing that no man is an island, the ability to ask for help, the ability to concede that I don't know and I need to go and tool myself. Those are indisposables in leadership. And so as a mentor, you pass those things on. And there are some things that do not change. I mean, I know that in seafaring, the most competent marine pilot, a ship is brought into port the same way, the same moves, maybe with different toggles and different technology. But there are some things that are, that last in the technical space and, as we would say, the psychomotor skills. But there are some interpersonal things too that do not change. And so for the latter part of your question, a mentee and a person, a novice, which is a proper word, learning something, must learn that the most important thing that we manage is always our relationships. And that's very important. Respect for persons, a wisdom as to how to diffuse a tense situation and how to manage self in that kind of situation. Those things are timeless and they must be passed on sometimes before the harder skills.
How does CMU help women move from training into opportunity? And what does inclusive workforce development look like in practical terms?
That's an exciting question. Well, I want to say this without fear or favor, that CMU is in the vanguard of helping women to prepare for the industry. By way of just our student numbers, I think we are one of the few places that almost have few places, and when I say place, I mean institutions of higher education, universities, that has almost a 50-50 divide in male-female ratio. I think we still have 49-51, something like that, with men leading, and that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing at all, because I'm sure that there are places where women are more dominant. So the first thing is that we don't have any quota on how many females are. You have the capacity and the desire, come. You will be prepared with this with this clarity that all persons are important. And even on the employee side, so we talk about student numbers and student enablement. We have young women across all our programs, especially in the non-traditional female spaces of engineering and those things. And I was about to say on the employee side, the university does not put a ceiling on us. I get to function as the president of the Women in Maritime Association, which I say carefully is almost a full-time job. And I get to function as the director of graduate studies and research in this university. I am asked in the former capacity to move a couple times per year to ensure out of Jamaica, away from my desk. And I have a university under a president that permits me that movement. I still have to do my work, don't be fooled. But there is no feeling that, oh, I can't say yes to this because I'm going to be stopped. None of that happens at the CMU that I know of. So I put that right there. And so we enjoy the call to be your best self, doing your best work, and the enablement from the capacity to study as a student, as a member of staff, the capacity to go to seminars, conferences, to research, to grow, aligns with the strategic initiative of the CMU, which is articulated as we have a growth and innovation vision and strategy, growth, innovation, and we live our best spaces there. So our students right across the board and the workforce gets to pivot and grow along with the industry. And that's a good thing.
Right. Okay. This is a little more like I would say it's a part 2 to the previous question. It's a little more specific. But can you tell me about a student whose trajectory changed because somebody opened the door, and what that revealed to you about the power of access?
Wow. We have I am stuttering because I don't know how far back to go, but I remember the first president of our student chapter for the Women in Maritime Association student chapter here at CMU. We had a young lady who we approached and asked to lead. She was a natural leader, and she stepped up to the plate. She was a member of the cadet corps at the time and a full-time student in a very demanding program. And she took on the leadership of the student chapter and became a sort of ambassador for CMU and by extension WiMAC and the student chapter. She demanded excellence from herself and from her colleagues, and she was leading not just cadets, because the student chapter at the time and now had students from across the programs in the CMU that goes to sea. So the BSc in cruise ship management, we had some of those students. And then we had seafarers of engineers and nautical students. She is a recipient of the American Caribbean Maritime Foundation scholarship. She represented the CMU in that capacity here and overseas. And she became one of our first students to secure employment with, I think it's Carnival Cruise Lines. Every time we hear of her, she is doing amazing things. I follow her on LinkedIn as a student ambassador. She's Nashana Strong. She is doing amazing things. And I'm not sure we could say her trajectory changed because she wanted to be a seafarer. But she has just broken barriers and is an example to those behind her. And I think her work with the student chapter, having access to broader spaces, like even being selected by Dr. Jenny Brown-Metzger, the ACMF, to work, has given her space. She has met and had conversation with amazing people like Dr. Jennifer Nugent-Hill. And she has been, an ambassador for what we do. And before we had a student chapter, there were other students. We had a student who when she finished her program and went back to her home country of Antigua, she was bringing into port as a trainee pilot the largest cruise ship that was docking in Antigua. And I remember when the manager of the Antigua port, Mr. Darwin Telemack, could literally put out a spread on her in the papers there. And when I looked, I said, Lannis George was our student. And that's part of the, that's kind of the catalyst for the student chapter for me. Because when I looked at the work of Lannis George, I said that we shouldn't be claiming our students for WiMAC after they leave and do amazing things. Mm-hmm. We should be claiming them while they're here and tipping them off. And so there's Lannis and there are other people before. We have a young lady who came out of our BSc in Logistics and Supply Chain Management program, who Perez Isia took on as a ship planner in Panama. And so we've always had young women who are doing excellently. With the student chapter, what we have is a little more intentionality as we interface with those students.
Okay, great. So we're about to close our interview. But I have one final question for you. So this year's theme is From Policy to Practice, Advancing Gender Equality for Maritime Excellence. I wanted to ask, what does that mean to you? And what would you say to young women considering a future in the maritime space?
What policy to practice means is that we who are working in the field, we have to take on the designation of being the policymakers. So we have to be ideating as to how we can make this maritime sector more inclusive and more open to women and all practitioners in the field. And so we have to talk about what do we do to ensure the sustained viability of the sector. For me, I am big on a maritime conscience project. I'd love to see us as a maritime state that Jamaica is, or Professor Spencer will always say that we're a large maritime state. I'd love to see us having the children who are coming into all levels of education, early childhood, primary, secondary, conscious that we exist and the sea that is larger than our land space makes us, the sea makes us who we are. It impacts not just our climate, but our economics and everything else. And we have to be intentional about putting that in curriculum. And two, for somebody who wants to get into this sector, find yourself. What are you excited about? What do you want to do to earn a living? And when you think about what that thing is, you will find alignment in the maritime sector. When you find that alignment, run over here and work with us. You'll find that you will be making a good choice. You'll make money, but you'll enjoy the thing. Find a university that helps you to become that person and make that university CMU. That's a shameless plug. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Smith Johnson.